Ready to get started?
I think we're ready to go.
Okay. All right. Let's begin our public meeting. This is the regular monthly board meeting of the Alameda County Water District on April 10th. It's a Tuesday. We normally have our meetings on the second Thursday of the month, but by law we have to do it today. So, would the secretary take the roll call, please?
Oh, do you want to do the 4 or 5?
It's number 2 on the agenda.
Sorry. Directors Gunther. Here. Akbari. Here. Huang. Here. Weed. Here. And Sethy.
Here. And so I'm going to ask Director Handley from USD to lead us in the salute. Both of you, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, at this time we will take public comments. Members of the public may address the board on any issues not listed on the agenda which are within the purview of the Alameda County Water District. Members of the public who wish to address the board on a scheduled agenda item should approach the speaker's podium at the time the item is introduced. Looks like we have...
Hi, Kelly Abreu, Mission Peak Conservancy. I have a handout, which is a newspaper article from January 29th on a local development approval. I guess I hand it over here.
You can, yeah, give it to me. Thank you, sir.
So that was a January 29th community meeting. I'll talk about that in a moment. Director Sethy was at a dam tour for Calaveras Reservoir a few days ago, along with so a lot of people from the county and from Sunol. Very few of us from Fremont were there, but the major flood risk of flooding from that dam is going to be here in Fremont and Newark and Union City and Dakota and Alvarado and Niles. Major flood risk, much more than Sunol or anywhere else. So we need to pay attention to that dam and you know, wake up, go take their tours, go visit their project, you know, listen to what they tell us about dam safety. A lot of interesting things going on over there. I learned a lot, and I recommend that you send your, you know, civil engineers and various people who might know something about that to keep an eye on these things. They actually had the Sunol Municipal Advisory Commission there, council. You know, we could send a lot more people like that from Fremont, Alvarado, Dakota, Newark. The people are going to get flooded, you know. They should be keeping an eye on these things. We also have a network of agencies that oversees land development, watersheds, and water resources in southern Alameda County. To the east of us, we have the County Planning Commission, the State Water Resources Control Board, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the County Department of Environmental Health, the Sunol Municipal Advisory Council, the Zone 7 Water Agency, and the SFPUC. Each and every one of these agencies has abdicated its duty. They have failed to protect a tributary of Alameda Creek that feeds the Sunol Valley Golf Course. The water course was altered about 10 years ago without required permits. This is it right here. This is the alteration. This is an artificial beach. This is Google Earth or Google Maps. It's very big. It's visible on the satellites. It's not a secret. If anybody owns Google, can use Google, you can find it. Each and every an earthen embankment dam was constructed for a recreational pond of 6 million gallons. They did not improve the dam prior to construction. A few years ago, the agencies again stood by passively as an artificial white sand beach was installed on its banks. They also didn't lift a finger or issue any permits when a parking lot for dozens of cars was built. This entertainment facility is right on the east border of Fremont on Morrison Canyon Road. East End. So, East End, Morrison Canyon Road, that's how you'll find it. People of Fremont don't have their heads in the sand. They're aware of the stealth development in the Fremont Hills. Over 100 residents turned out on January 29th and brought out 2 county supervisors to hear their concerns and suspicions. Newspaper headline was Fremont residents, concerns, suspicions. Planning Director of Alameda County was on hand, the Planning Director of Fremont, the Public Works Director of Fremont, the Mayor of Fremont. This is not people with their heads in their sand. What's happening here is they called it a barn, but because the rules don't require that barns be reviewed, they built a palace instead. Residents of Fremont are not happy with stealth development in the hills. This is subverting Measure D for the county, Measure T for the city. This is a perversion of planning, and the water course alteration is an unlawful environmental disaster. I urge you to talk to your colleagues about it. The agencies I listed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll close public comments and we'll move on to the consent calendar. I'd like to solicit a motion from the director for approving the consent calendar with any amendments.
I will move to add items 5.1 and 5.2 to the consent calendar, please.
Second that motion.
Okay.
Vote.
Sure. Directors Gunther.
Aye.
Akbari.
Aye.
Huang.
Aye.
Weed.
Aye.
And Sethy.
Aye. And would somebody like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar as amended?
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Okay. Directors Gunther.
Aye.
Akbari.
Aye.
Huang.
Aye.
Weed.
Aye.
And Sethy.
Aye. So we'll move on to the action calendar, and the first item that we have under for public discussion is a resolution honoring Union Sanitary District on its 100th year anniversary.
Thank you, President Sethy. Union Sanitary District will be celebrating its centennial on May 27th, 2018. When USD was founded, it served approximately 3,000 residents and installed its first sewer at Hickory Street and Wells Avenue in Newark in 1923. Obviously, USD has come a long way since then. They currently provide sanitary service to a population of over 350,000 in the cities of Fremont, Newark, and Union City. They manage over 810 miles of underground pipeline. They receive over 22 million gallons of wastewater per day at the Union City Alvarado treatment plant and employs currently 137 staff. USD has fulfilled its mission to safely and responsibly collect and treat wastewater and to recover resources from processed water streams while protecting human health and improving the environment in a way that benefits the region. And just a couple of additional things that I'd like to bring up is that ACWD has been working closely with USD over the years on a number of issues, sharing the workload for annexations, partnering on that. We're obviously very grateful about the financing authority. I don't want to steal your thunder. I have personally been involved on one of the worst water main pipeline breaks that I've seen, and USD's forces were there with equipment and working side by side with ACWD's own utility workers when we had that large main break on Peralta Avenue over 10 years ago now, I think. But I've never seen a river run through Centerville like that, and it was really encouraging to see the two agencies working side by side. So, and I'm actually happy to report that I'm actively engaging in discussions with USD's General Manager, Paul Eldridge, looking for opportunities where we can partner even more in the future. So with that, I will defer to President Sethy, and then we have this beautiful resolution plaque that I'm sure that you would like to present to your counterparts, and we'll take photos, and it'll be just awesome.
Okay. So, as a bit of a historian on water and sewer in the area, especially water, I was asked to just say a few words in recognition and honor of your 100-year anniversary as an agency. And so I couldn't help but think about all of the common links that the two agencies have had since the founding of both districts. We're the first and oldest county water district in the state of California, and USD is one of the very oldest formally organized union sanitary districts in California. And we forget that a lot of California commerce actually was focused in Washington Township, you know, after the gold rush. And like I'm just going to cite a few little tidbits that I find it coincidental. The first sewer main and laterals that were connected was on Wells Avenue and Hickory Street. That part of Wells is now renamed Enterprise Drive. Our back entrance here is Enterprise Drive. Our district was formed as a water conservation district to protect the Niles Cone Aquifer, and we were a community of literally hundreds and hundreds of wells. And then your first sewer line is on Wells Avenue. As I was looking back at board members, Louis Rushin, who was the principal architect of bringing Union Sanitary District together, our equivalent is Joseph Shin, who was the longtime president of the board and founding member. And these were men that were in their 30s and 40s and very enterprising, most of them self-educated and successful in business, and really community leaders. The first sanitary board meetings were held at Louis Rushin's home on Thornton Avenue, but most of the meetings over the next couple of decades were held at the Stevenson building on Fremont Boulevard, what was called Main Street back then. And that building was owned by Mr. E.H. Stevenson, one of our founding board members, and we have our own E.H. Stevenson right over here too. No relation.
We think.
But you can already, I mean, you can easily imagine that there was a lot of interfacing between water and sewer district board members, management, engineers, things like that in the early years. And as our community was being built out, there was another common link. When the big build-out happened in the 50s and 60s, the general managers of both districts hired a lot of returning GIs from World War II who were experts at digging trenches. Neither district could afford to purchase Caterpillar tractors and other heavy equipment to dig trenches, so they literally hired people to do a very back-breaking job of digging trenches. And for many of those years, and I've talked to a lot of old-timers who've told me these war stories between the two districts, that people commonly worked 6 days a week, Monday through Friday, 10-hour days, 7 to 12, 2 hours off for lunch. Most people went home because they lived right here in the community, and they returned back and worked from 2 to 7, and then half a day on Saturday. And so there were a lot of people, in fact, that worked for both agencies out in the field. And engineers worked 6 days a week too, Mr. Stevenson. Because there was such a demand on both agencies for getting in water and sewer. One of the other interesting aspects, which I go into more detail about in a history presentation, is before the three cities were formed and we had city councils in the latter part of the 50s, the power centers of our community really revolved around water and sewer. That's where most of the planning decisions were made, the development decisions, all the progress that was going on in the Tri-City area, and as well, not just for the farmers and orchard owners, but for a very vibrant industry that we had around here, whether it was fruit and vegetable canning, which used an intense amount of water. In Union City, we had Pacific State Steel, which was the largest employer in the area, largest employer in Union City. And that was a big water and wastewater entity. And so we shared a lot of community demands on us during those decades, and I can think back all the way up through the 70s, really, where it was true. These were the most well-attended board meetings. The rooms would be packed at times because people were competing for water and sewer. And the reason is that property values would rise sharply, people could develop their land, and there was a lot of competition in the community to make sure that you had water and sewer first, and then other utilities coming to the property, like gas and electric. So there are stories where we've had board meetings that I know happened at ACWD up through the 60s where there were several hundred people that wanted to be speakers, and it would take 3 days to do a board meeting, and they would move it from the district headquarters on Fremont Boulevard over to Washington High School. And today I was going to refresh some of the things that Mr. Shaver pointed out. We've had so many things that we've done jointly together. We share a lot of information back and forth. There's a lot of exchange between engineering groups and operations because of conjunctive work. I can think of, in addition to that Fremont Boulevard incident, the one down in Alvarado that happened more recently, and all of the great work that was done coordinating the fault crossing for Bay Division Pipeline number 3 and 4 at Mission Boulevard and 680. Union Sanitary had to do a lot of work well in advance, then the Water District, then San Francisco, and it took a few years to get that work done. And so I can think of many complementary projects where we've worked together. And our general managers meet periodically. We have joint board meetings every once in a while, which I find useful. I'm sure all the directors do. And we do joint studies together, like our water recycling study. So I hope these things continue into the future. I'm expressing my opinions on behalf of the full board. And I think that there is, in the end, a mutual respect between both organizations and the personnel. And so with that, I would like to present you with a plaque on...
You want to do the motion?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So the recommendation is by motion, adopt a resolution honoring Union Sanitary District for 100 years of wastewater collection, treatment, and disposal services to the residents, businesses, and industries of the cities of Fremont, Newark, and Union City.
May I ask we're not going to pass anything here, right? No vote.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You do have to make a...
So I would like to ask our 2 senior members of the board to sponsor that.
I'll make the motion. I'll second the motion.
Directors Gunther?
Aye.
Akbari?
Aye.
Huang?
Aye.
Weed?
Aye.
And Sethy.
Aye. And so...
Nice piece of lumber.
This way.
I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We'll take it back to our board.
May I share one other little story with you about Louis Rushin? I'm not sure what that says. So, you know, Louis Rushin has always fascinated me as an early civic leader in our community. And if you read his biography, which is in some of our county history books, it's quite fascinating. He was born in Germany, sent here as an 8-year-old all by himself, put on a ship in Hamburg, Germany, and came halfway around the world to San Francisco. He didn't speak a word of English, and he had his name sewn into his jacket with the name of his uncle in San Francisco, where he was supposed to go and live with. And he got his education at Lincoln High School, Lincoln School, primary education, and then he came down to work in Newark for Southern Pacific in the railroad yard. And from there, he saved up money, really self-taught himself in business, worked for a merchant as a clerk, accountant, and eventually started the Newark Volunteer Fire Department, then was on the Board of Education, and finally he served many years on the Union Sanitary Board. And he had an incredibly full life, and he still has family that lives around this community. One is a well-known dentist in the area. And so I look with fascination at Joseph Shin, William Patterson, and your founding board has as rich a history as any in the area. So with that, I'm looking forward to coming to your board meeting next month. We have a...
Would you like to ask them to speak?
Yes. I don't want to take up all the time. So we'll let you share your thoughts about the history.
Well, I was enlightened by all the tidbits that you shared with us. I'm nowhere close to a historian as you are, but I do want to thank the board for the resolution, and we look forward to seeing all of you at the open house that we have celebrating it on May 19th, and our first board meeting in May as well.
Thank you, and as Anjali, every time I talk to you, Paul, I learn a little more of the history of USD and the Tri-Cities, and it really is fascinating.
And we convey our thanks on behalf of our entire board, of course.
I'm jealous about one thing about USD. 3 years ago, you put on the most fabulous open house that I have ever seen in the community, where you had well over 1,000 people show up on a Saturday for an open house at Union Sanitary District. And I thought that was phenomenal.
We don't know if that was a fluke or not. We'll find out after this next one.
It absolutely was not a fluke.
We thought there would be 300 to 500 people. 500 we thought would be great. I think we ended up with around 1,200. Paul was never there. He was always making runs to Costco.
I could add very quickly. My jealousy of USD is that you have a 5-year 218 because you put all of your bill on the property tax bill where you get 100% collection without having to worry about the challenges of going after and collecting. Thank you.
You've given us some ideas. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now we have to move on to a public hearing and a resolution on the replenishment assessment for fiscal year 2018-19. And it's not as if I haven't spoken enough this evening already, but by law, I'm required by the state to read this fairly lengthy opening here, and so I hope you will bear with me. So we're going to open the public hearing, and I'm going to read through a few different parts here. So, on behalf of the Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome the public and your participation in this evening's public hearing. This public hearing will be on the proposed increase to the replenishment assessment rate for groundwater pumped or extracted for purposes other than agricultural and municipal recreation. Thank you for all attending. Again, the purpose of this public hearing is to consider the proposed increase to the replenishment assessment rate, which only applies to the operation of water wells to extract groundwater, not to most customers who receive water from ACWD's distribution system. Now I'd like to review the ground rules for the public hearing. First is the process. I will open the public hearing. ACWD staff will make a presentation. Upon conclusion of the presentation, the board and ACWD staff will receive public comments and/or protests. The board and staff will receive all comments without responding. Upon conclusion of the public comments and/or protests, the board will request input from staff, respond to questions or comments that are raised by the public, deliberate on the issues, and then close the public hearing. 2, we'll take public comment. Each person will have 5 minutes to comment, and we will require strict compliance with this time limit so that everyone is treated the same way. Again, staff will provide you with 15 seconds advance warning, and we will let you know when time is up.
There are no speaker cards. We don't
Okay,
use them
so
today.
no instructions on speaker cards. So the public hearing is now open. Staff will now make a presentation, and I ask you to refrain from asking questions or making comments until the public comment portion of the public hearing is completed. So I'll ask the General Manager to move us forward.
Thank you, President Sethy. We're going to essentially do a very abbreviated presentation because the board received a pretty comprehensive presentation from Mr. Hollowell at the last board meeting. So with that, I will turn this over to Water Resources Manager Stephen In.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. On November 9, 2017, the board ordered the preparation of the 2018 survey report on groundwater conditions, otherwise called the survey report, as provided in Section 7 of the District's Replenishment Assessment Act. As a result, the following actions took place. On January 19, 2018, letters were sent to all interested parties identified as part of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, informing them that the board would be discussing and considering items pertaining to the Replenishment Assessment Act at the February 8th, March 8th, and April 10th, 2018 regular Board of Directors meetings. On February 8, 2018, the board, 1, received a completed survey report and the 2017 groundwater monitoring report, 2, declared its intent to raise funds by replenishment assessment in fiscal year 2018 and 19, and 3, scheduled a public hearing for April 10, 2018, tonight. As required by Proposition 218, affected well owners, operators, and owners of property with production wells were provided written notice of the proposed increase in the replenishment assessment rate for purposes other than agricultural and municipal recreation uses at least 45 days prior to the public hearing. The notice was also posted on the district's website. In addition to information on the proposed increase, the notice included the date, time, and location of the public hearing. On March 8, 2018, staff presented to the board the report's findings and basis for the recommended replenishment assessment. Notice of the time and place of the public hearing was published in the newspaper, the East Bay Times, as required by the Replenishment Assessment Act. At this hearing, all interested parties may be heard in support of or opposition to the proposed replenishment assessment, the survey report, or the board's determinations. On March 20th, the district did receive a letter from the City of Hayward providing comments to the survey report on groundwater conditions and the 2017 groundwater monitoring report. The district evaluated and considered all the comments and responded to each comment in the city's letter. Consequently, minor changes were made to the reports as outlined in the district's response letter. Copies of the updated reports have been provided to the board tonight, and copies of the city's letter and the district's responses are included in the board packet. For setting the replenishment assessment for the coming fiscal year, the Replenishment Assessment Act specifies the actions that must be taken through board resolution no sooner than the close of the public hearing, but no later than the second Tuesday of May. The resolutions, 1, contain the findings that update groundwater conditions and state the amount of replenishment assessment funds needed next fiscal year. 2, set the replenishment assessment rate, which is $8 per acre foot for agricultural and municipal recreation uses, which is the maximum allowed under the Replenishment Assessment Act, and $437 per acre foot for all other uses. And finding that the modifications to the replenishment assessment are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. And 3, provide procedures and statement forms. Should the board wish to extend the hearing or take additional time to consider the resolutions, a special board meeting would be required to meet the deadline stipulated in the Replenishment Assessment Act. That is, the public hearing must be completed on or before the first Tuesday in May, which is May 1st, and the resolutions adopted on or before the second Tuesday in May, which is May 8th. I just want to bring your attention that Michelle Myers, our Groundwater Resources Manager, and Mike Hallowell, who's the author of our survey report, are in the audience tonight in case the board has questions that they can respond to.
So I'd like to ask if there are any questions from the board to staff or among board members.
Let me ask the attorney on the practicality. This is somewhat of an archaic process. It was established a number of years ago by special legislation, which has some provisions for certain rates, etc. But it's my understanding of the replenishment assessments we're looking at now, possibly 96% of the total revenue will be generated by bills to Alameda County Water District. So we're billing ourselves for almost all of the costs, and there's a very small portion. In that scenario, is there any challenge that anyone could ever any effective challenge that could ever be made if 96% is really coming back to the same agencies that is establishing the fee?
So the legal question is whether somebody could challenge the process or the substantive basis for implementing the replenishment assessment. The answer is yes. You're still subject to the laws that apply to this process. And the fact that most of the replenishment assessment is being charged to ACWD could impact the protest procedures, but not necessarily the legal liability.
Okay, but as a practical matter, it would be very difficult to, unless there was some blatant violation among ourselves that someone could point out. But it's an internal. What strikes me is to recognize that this is, it's an internal document and process.
The replenishment assessment is not just an internal document, it's actually part of the law.
Well, it's a legislative requirement to self-deal, as my interpretation.
I think the intent of the replenishment fee structure as it's been designed and implemented is to allocate the cost of the management of the groundwater basin proportionally to the beneficiaries of the basin.
Right.
So that's because most of our customers are connected to the distribution system. That's how they pay for those proportional benefits. And the replenishment assessment that's charged to the well operators is how they pay for their proportion of the benefits.
Well, it's an excellent document, an excellent process, and I view it as more of an as an auditing effort as opposed to it's a way to document our costs and functions, and in that sense, it's a valued document and process. And my take.
And I will say, from a legal perspective, I have looked at the process that this district has gone through and the substantive basis for it, and it's my view that the district has complied with all of the legal requirements as required by the Replenishment Assessment Act, as well as the other laws that apply to this particular process.
It's awkward, but we're getting there. And it's good work. Thank you.
So, any other further questions of staff?
I'd like to open the public comment portion.
Am I skipping it over? I skipped it because we don't have any.
You don't know.
You don't need to.
You have to do it.
Okay. I'm still in training wheels, believe it or not. So, I would like to make sure that there's a chance for public comments during this portion of the hearing. Are there any? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment period.
And just to clarify for the record, there was the one comment letter from the City of Hayward, and it's my understanding that there were no other comments submitted by the deadline for submitting comments, and there are no other comments here tonight.
Right. Just a real quick question. I read the reply letter that, Michelle, you wrote to Hayward. Was that satisfactory for them?
I received an email that they're reviewing the comment letter as well as another report, so.
Okay, great. We'll hear it in committee at some future time. So we'll go back to board questions, if there are any of staff. Seeing none among the board. Deliberation really on anything?
You closed the public hearing, so now you can consider the action item.
So we'll formally close the public hearing at this time and consider the take into consideration the adopting the required resolutions provided under this item. So would a director like to make a motion here?
So the formal staff recommendation is written in the staff report is to, by motion, adopt the following required resolutions. There's three of them. Number one is stating findings and determining need for replenishment assessment. Number two is levying a replenishment assessment and finding replenishment assessment exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act.
Learning.
And three is providing procedures for payment of replenishment assessment, provided that the board does not desire any additional meeting to either continue the hearing or further consideration of the resolutions.
Thank you, Council.
So would somebody like to move staff recommendation?
I'll move to staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Okay. Directors Gunther.
Aye.
Akbari.
Aye.
Huang.
Aye.
Weed. And Sethy.
Aye. Okay, so with that lengthy item taken care of, we'll move on to item 5.5, which is the authorization of contract services for school lead and drinking water testing.
Yes, and our manager of operations and maintenance, Steve Peterson, will begin this item.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. The district's drinking water is subject to strict testing and meets all state and federal requirements, including those for lead. Recently, California Community Water Systems, CWSs, have been required to conduct lead in drinking water testing at schools within their service area under 2 regulatory mechanisms: state-issued amendments to CWS domestic water supply permits and the enactment of Assembly Bill 746. In October 2017, the East Bay Municipal Water District, East Bay MUD, entered into a contract with Terraphase Engineering, Inc., Terraphase, to perform school lead in drinking water testing after completing a competitive bidding process. In compliance with Board Procurement Policy Number 1, staff obtained a negotiated quote from Terraphase in the amount of $127,619 based on East Bay MUD's scope of work for testing services within the district service area. Contracting with Terraphase for testing services will ensure the district will comply with the school lead in drinking water testing requirements in a timely and cost-effective manner. There are adequate funds in the biennial budget for this expense. Board approval of an agreement with Terraphase will help the district meet its strategic goal number 1, cost-effectiveness and value. The recommendation is by motion authorize the general manager to enter into an agreement with Terraphase Engineering, Inc. for school lead in drinking water testing in the amount not to exceed $140,381, which is the total of the proposal amount, $127,619, and a 10% contingency, $12,762. And with me tonight are Lyda Hakes, the program manager for this project, and production manager Mike Wickham, and they're both here to answer any questions from the board.
Questions, directors?
I'm trying to get myself around this thing here. I'm okay with it. Let's start with that. Fine with what the suggestion is. So we're hiring a company, correct me if I'm wrong, we're hiring a company to test the water in the local schools.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, this very similar process to what we have to do under the lead and copper rule, where we have to go into people's homes. But last time I checked, our responsibility, and I want to make this clear for the public, ends at the water meter that goes to the school. Correct?
Yes.
However, somebody in the state has determined that we, I guess maybe we're the experts, I suppose, will go into the schools and test their water past the meter. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. The reason I'm okay with this is we represent the Tri-Cities. The 3 school districts are our constituents, as well as I think there were a couple of private schools thrown in. They are our constituents. So I have no problem spending constituent money testing something that I feel should be the responsibility of the school district. School district is a governed body elected by the elected by their residents. Whether or not they want to test for lead in their water should be their responsibility, not the water districts, not ACWD's. I'm perfectly willing to help them. The conference I went to, I had to do some quick checking because I misplaced my notes. This subject was there. And there's a lot of misinformation out there about this bill and about what's going on in our schools. However, I do support what we're doing, and I do support the fact that we're doing it because the same people that send their kids to those schools are our ratepayers. So whether or not the school board does it or we do it, as long as we could do it and we do it in an economical fashion, I'm all for helping out the school districts. But I just wanted to confirm that, yes, for the record, our water stops at the meter, and we do not have a lead problem.
That's correct.
Thank you.
I would like to add that if there's any remedial work required, those costs are borne by the school district. I just wanted to make that clear. Our responsibility is only for testing the water.
Thank you.
I actually have a clarification question. I thought the compliance point under lead and copper rule is actually at the tap, not at the meter.
You know, I was thinking more broadly in terms of the larger question of where does our responsibility lie.
Right, we lose control.
Yes, but you are correct in
meter.
that the sampling point is at the tap for the lead and copper rule.
I see this as an extension of the lead and copper rule, which I also don't necessarily agree with, but that's beside the point.
Okay. Thank you.
As I read this, and my understanding is that Newark stepped up and had all of their schools tested. So I don't see Newark in the list of schools to be addressed in this contract.
That is correct. The Newark schools have been tested already.
Do we have an indication that Fremont Unified and New Haven now be required to do the testing in their schools, or is it still at their discretion of the school board?
According to AB 746, they are required to test those schools that don't meet the exemption requirements. And those are
the date that they were built.
Yes, let me refer to the staff report. The exemptions include schools built or modernized after January 1, 2010, and schools already sampled after January 1, 2009, with the results posted on the school's website.
So great reluctance on the part of at least two of the unified school districts to test their water. Not for whatever reason. Well, it's been suggested that, well, we've had people complain that it was the water that resulted in their kids having poor educational performance. But hopefully this will encourage them then to proceed ahead and test their schools.
We've been in contact with both administrators in both schools, and we're in cooperation with both entities.
But we don't have, the school board has yet to authorize any testing at all on their turf, right? Not Fremont and...
It's not up to the school board to authorize this testing.
I thought...
I think there's a big confusion because there are two requirements. One is voluntary and one is not. Thank you, Lida.
Hi, good evening. So the situation is we do have the two different programs. So under the permit amendment, it was a voluntary program. So as in the staff report, we completed all of the Newark Unified Schools, one private school, and then the two California State Special Schools. And then after the passage of AB 746, we had been approached by Fremont Unified to start coordinating efforts for their schools. They had done some previous testing, and so as part of our evaluation, we're going to be looking at the 44 schools, the ones that subset that was previously tested to ensure that they meet the AB 746 criteria. If they do, then we don't need to test that. So the 44 Fremont schools may be reduced down by up to 10. For the New Haven, we've been in contact with them. They submitted a letter to us in February of this year, which asked us to test their 9 schools. However, of their 9 schools, one of them is actually located in Hayward, and so is served by City of Hayward. So we're at 8 New York schools. We're looking at completing their testing by May 10th. So we clearly meet the permit amendment. They were in a gray area where they're forced under AB 746, but because they submitted a letter requesting testing, now we're under both. Fremont Unified, our goal is to finish before the end of the academic year, which is June 13th.
It will be tested and published.
Correct. That is our goal using this contract mechanism.
And Lyda, just to be clear, under the drinking water permit amendment, there was more latitude prior, and we were going to have a little more flexibility on the testing, originally thinking that we would use interns.
Correct.
And then with the passage of AB 746, it got more urgent, and hence the outside services to help us with the spike in workload. Is that fair?
Yes. Yes, we had done outreach to all 3 school districts, the 2 state special and the private schools in our area, and had very limited feedback or requests. And now that it's gone, it's required under AB 746, now everyone is at our front door asking us to test immediately.
So there was a requirement for ACWD to be a little nimble and kind of change direction on how we were going to address this. And I'm happy to see that we were able to pivot and make an adjustment.
Thank
you
you.
very much. Thank you, Lyda.
Comments?
One more question. Just for my own clarification and for the public, based on the legislation, any cost borne by the district does not need to be reimbursed by the school district.
No, that is correct. We bear all the testing costs.
Director Gunther would know the 3 words, unfunded state mandate.
I understand the words, but I also view this as, I'm a firm believer if our residents, although you have that one school in Hayward, go figure Union City, but you know, if it's our own ratepayers that have to pay this. So I'm perfectly fine with the fact that we have to do it. I mean, I'm not necessarily, like I said, in favor of what we're trying to prove, but information's good, I guess.
And it is a bona fide health concern. Lead at those young ages in water, even if it's not ACWD's fault, is a concern.
I'd like to add one other comment. I have wonderful staff in my department. And when we were faced with the need to perform this testing, Ms. Hakes suggested, well, why don't we obtain just a little bit more information? And Lyda, would you explain what other constituents we are testing for, and how do we plan to use that information?
Sure. So we saw this as an opportunity to collect data that would help us better understand our corrosion control. And so one of the concerns with lead is if you do not properly scale on the inside of your pipes, you're now exposing the pipe material to the water. You can release constituents such as lead. That's what happened in Flint, Michigan. So we're using this as an opportunity to measure parameters coming into the school that when we put them in a calculator, it tells us the scalability of that water. And this is really critical for us because we have 3 different treatment facilities running at various rates. The water moves back and forth in terms of which homes are seeing which water each day. And so by doing this, it allows us to track essentially what the water looks like leaving the desal facility or TP2 or blender. And then what does it look like when that water gets to the school? How has it changed? What's the mineral content like? And what does that scaling look like? So we're going to be using all of this data as a larger term project to look at our larger corrosion control and how effective it's being.
Thank you, Lyda.
Okay, you're welcome.
So I have a couple of comments and a question. First of all, it's been pretty widely reported in the news the number of water districts that have complained and school districts about trying to meet the deadline date, and some have seen it as a real burden to get through all the testing and everything. So I just want to compliment our own staff and team here for coordinating things in advance with the school districts, both the public and the private, to not only meet the deadline, but we're getting it done well ahead of time. So I think this is really good news for the community, and it's something to be reported on when we're completed. I would suggest trying to time it with the new school year, even though you're completing things maybe by summer, midsummer, just so that you get the maximum visibility out of it. Just a suggestion. And then number two, it really caught my eye when I went through my board agenda. I go, wow, this is really cool. This is the first time I've seen this. This will help the district meet its strategic goal number 1, cost effectiveness and value. We've linked our strategic plan to an action item.
I meant to mention that earlier in the meeting. What we're doing is in the summary portion of each staff report, identifying 1, maybe 2 of the strategic goals that we're hoping that this is helping us achieve. And the purpose of that is, just as you mentioned, first of all, I wanted to take every opportunity to remind the directors of the strategic plan that you worked hard to complete, and that it shouldn't just be a dusty volume on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
And I encourage you all to either download it on your Surface notebooks, or we'll be happy to provide you with hard copies so you can refer to it from time to time. Secondly, yes, integrating the strategic plan in the organization. It's a sneaky way of, we have staff and division managers that work on these staff reports. So assigning them to identify the strategic plan element that is helping to meet kind of makes them look at the strategic plan and know it a little better. So we're trying to kind of push the strategic plan down into the organization. And we had different ideas amongst executive staff, the best way to include this into the board packet. So we made it a little bit of a competition, and everybody tried it a different way, and then as a group we determined that the best way would be in the summary. So I thank executive staff for allowing me to have a little fun that way.
I like it. I hope we
Thank you for noticing.
Doing more of it.
We always appreciate when directors read these things.
So I just have one question, might lead to a few more, but just based on everything that I've read about how these testing programs are going on, not only here in California, but in other parts of the nation, do we have any visibility into what the experience is with other water districts and school districts, and how much, after we get the testing completed, how much time does it take to get the retrofit work done? And we know that the school districts are all strapped for money in their facilities budget, so can they even get this kind of work done if it's necessary?
Okay, so there are a couple questions in there, so if I missed it, let me know. So in terms of the experiences with other utilities, I'm actually part of CUA's committee for school-led testing. So we have conference calls regularly to kind of share information with each other. So I have an avenue into other utilities' experience through that venue.
That's good.
In addition, I attend the San Francisco Wholesale Customer Water Quality Committee meetings. It's 3 to 4 times a year, and in that venue we also talk about our experiences with school-led testing, who's been asked to participate, who's using a contractor, who's doing it in-house, what kind of problems are they seeing. One of the big challenges that I've seen from running our pilot program last year was that a lot of the schools don't have suitable outlets for actual testing. So for a first draw sample, you need a nice stream of water. And when you go to an outlet, like a drinking water fountain that's outside a playground, they usually will have 3 outlets to drink from. Well, the first one doesn't have any flow at all, the second one kind of sputters, and maybe the third one you can get a good sample. And so when I would go to talk to the school maintenance staff, I would tell them, I'm really stuck, I don't have many locations I can sample. If you can fix this leak or you can somehow fix this water pressure, then we can get 5 samples from your school. And the short answer is they just don't have time to dedicate to that, especially once you start getting towards the end of the year. They're setting up for graduations, and so their staff time is already allocated to other purposes. So a lot of times they're kind of stuck with these older infrastructure and older outlets that may or may not work. In terms of corrective actions, there are multiple options. One is they can completely take it out of service. So if they have a water fountain that is over the 15 parts per billion limit, and they've confirmed it, they've taken 2 samples and it shows that, then they can simply cut off the water to that location and essentially take it out of service, and that's considered a corrective action. We did have one school that was confirmed to be over the action level, and so they took it out of service. They put a garbage bag out of service, no one can use it, and then over the summer they went and replaced that actual drinking water fountain. We went back and sampled and showed that it was under the 15. So you can take it out of service, you could do a replacement. Another option that the state, I believe, will allow is if you can demonstrate through flushing. So you come in first thing in the morning, you operate that device for 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, and you can collect a sample and show that it is now below the 15. That would be considered viable. So you can change infrastructure, you can take it out of service, or you can implement an action such as flushing. So varying levels of cost associated with each of those mechanisms.
Yes. You mentioned we had the one school out, and it was a water fountain, correct?
Correct.
I remember years ago, some years ago now, there was, I think there was some of the water fountains like had lead ballast in them or something, which...
Yeah, so I don't remember the exact year, but water coolers, you have different style water fountains, so they have these coolers essentially that used to be lead lined, and then those were completely banned. And so there's a list of which manufacturer and model number, so those should all be removed. This wasn't that case. It wasn't on the disallowed list. This was a location that I think was just infrequently used, and so I think it was just long residence time of the water. It was stagnated a long time, and so when we went back and changed it, the water went below the 15 when the school changed the water fountain.
Interesting.
Yeah, but there's lead in brass components, so there's always that concern.
You know, what I would appreciate is if you could come back to, let's say, the Water Quality Committee or something, with a report that follows through on everything, so we can explain to the public what problems were identified, what's the resolution, do we expect to meet the deadline for this piece of legislation.
Okay, I think that's a great suggestion.
Do we have any information, we probably don't, on the lifespan of a water cooler, particularly one in, let's say, a high school or junior high? I think would be kind of a limited lifespan.
That's a great question, but I don't know.
Okay, just curious.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so thank you, Lyda. So this is just a report right now to...
No, actually, the motion again is to authorize the general manager to enter into an agreement with Terraphase, as Mr. Peterson indicated. So
I'll move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Directors Gunther.
Aye.
Akbari.
Aye.
Huang.
Aye.
Weed.
Aye.
And Sethy.
Aye. So we'll now move on to item 5.6, authorization to execute a grant agreement with the State Coastal Conservancy for the Alameda Creek Fish Passage project.
At this point, I will abstain from and recuse myself from the issue. It's not because of a legal conflict, but I have been involved in...
Director, we do have a common law conflict, right?
Well, a common law point of interest, which I'm involved in litigation in which this could be a positive result. But whether it be positive or negative, I'm going to have to recuse myself.
You're going to simply recuse yourself because you have a common law conflict.
And it's for both items,
We're
right?
taking care of item 5.6 and 5.7 back to back.
And both items reflect Rubberdam 3, right? Okay.
So I'll turn it over to staff here.
Thank you. We are transitioning to the happy time of the board meeting, not because Director Weed has recused himself, but because...
Ouch. I think he heard that.
but because normally it's very clear to me which item I refer, an agenda item, to which staff person I refer the item to. But in this case, I could easily refer it to any of the department heads because we created this interdepartmental grant coordination work group. All departments have worked on both of these items, and we've been on a hot streak lately when it comes to landing grant funding. So for the purposes of these items, though, and the lead department is Water Resources, I will refer this to Mr. In.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shaver. The Alameda County Water District has been awarded an $825,000 grant from the State Coastal Conservancy's Proposition 1 proposal solicitation to support funding the construction of the rubberdam number 1 and rubberdam number 3 fish ladders. The State Coastal Conservancy requires a resolution by the Alameda County Water District's Board of Directors approving the grant of funds, authorizing the general manager to execute a grant agreement, and taking other related actions. Board authorization of this grant agreement will help meet the district's strategic plan goal number 2.1, maintain and enhance sustainability and reliability of local and regional water supplies. For the last several years, one of the annual goals of the board was set for staff was to aggressively pursue grant opportunities. As a result, staff formed an interdepartmental grant coordination team to pursue grants for funding critical district projects and has obtained 4 grants. Should the board approve the 2 grant funding awards on tonight's agenda, the district will have secured a total of $9,933,075. So the recommendation is by motion, adopt a resolution approving the grant of funds from the State Coastal Conservancy, authorizing the general manager to execute a grant agreement with the State Coastal Conservancy for the construction of the rubberdam number 1 and the rubberdam number 3 fish ladders, and taking other related actions as required by the State Coastal Conservancy.
Any questions from the board?
No, just my compliments to the staff. Long time ago, I used to review grant applications. I understand how difficult it is to actually prepare a well-structured application, and it usually involves a lot of coordination from the parties involved. So great job, everybody. I know this is only one of the 2 grants we're going to have agreement tonight, so really good job. I'm really proud of all the work that you guys have done to get us this money. You know that I'm a firm believer in that all these grants are funded through the tax money that our customers pay. It is only right that we get to bring some of them back to us. Great job, and thank you.
No questions from my end, but also congratulations to staff on getting both of these grants. It's awesome.
Item 5.6 is probably one of the easiest votes I've ever had to do. I will be honest, I think 5.7 makes it even pales compared to 5.7. So, thanks. Staff did a wonderful job on this, and the whole pursuit of grant money, I think, has really paid off, and thinking about other things that are out there and other, just right now, we were just talking about the school district is, there's probably money out there if they pursue it, but they don't have time. So thank you, staff. This has been absolutely, they're both no-brainer votes, but this is just two terrific items.
$25 million in project work is nothing to sneeze at. That's a lot of money for our ratepayers to support. And the fact that we've got about 40% of that covered really helps benefit all the ratepayers. It's ratepayer money that's going to pay for these projects if we didn't have these other funding sources. Considering the duration of the project by the time we complete the Bart Weir fish ladder, so it's 21 or 22, what's our expectation for additional grant money right now, especially from anything further from Prop 1, from the water proposition coming up in June, from the water initiative in November, and all of these other grant programs?
Staff is, the team actually is still going after some additional grants. We just submitted a application to, I think it's Fish and Wildlife. Yeah, I think that was for $2 million. I don't want to get your hopes up, but the application just went in, I think, a week ago. And we're also looking at another grant to submit in the near future. So there's still some Prop 1 money out there.
Mm-hmm. And then there are those two potential bond measures that have money earmarked in ways that we think our projects might mesh with.
Mm-hmm.
So
I was talking with somebody up at the California Water Policy Conference in Davis about this on the fishery restoration projects around Northern California, and this gentleman said, yours is the most important one in the Bay Area for everybody. That's how big this is. I hope we can communicate that to the public.
We'll have an opportunity when we talk about our groundbreaking ceremony.
Right. Okay, so would someone like to make a motion to move the staff recommendation?
I would love to move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Directors Gunther?
Aye.
Akbari?
Aye.
Huang?
Aye.
Weed? And Sethy?
Aye. And so we'll move to 5.7.
And 5.7 is authorization to execute a grant agreement with the California Wildlife Conservation Board for the Alameda Creek Fish Passage Project. And Mr. In will keep the hits coming.
Okay, so the district has also been awarded a $5,358,075 grant from the California Wildlife Conservation Board's Stream Flow Enhancement Program under the Water Quality Supply and Infrastructure Improvement Act of 2014, Prop 1, to support funding the construction of the Rubber Dam No. 1 and Rubber Dam No. 3 fish ladders. The California Wildlife Conservation Board requires a resolution by the Alameda County Water District. Wait. Lost my place here. Board of Directors authorizing the General Manager to execute a grant agreement and taking other related actions. Board authorization of this grant agreement will help meet the district's strategic plan goal 2.1, maintain and enhance sustainability and reliability of local and regional water supplies. The recommendation is by motion, adopt a resolution authorizing the General Manager to execute a grant agreement with the California Wildlife Conservation Board for the construction of the Rubber Dam No. 1 and Rubber Dam No. 3 fish ladders and taking other related actions as required by the California Wildlife Conservation Board.
Can I make one more comment? So in addition to getting a great grant application package together, I think staff as a whole, all the divisions need to take credit in getting all the bits and pieces of the puzzle together. There are a lot of relationship building with all the resources agencies and Alameda Creek Alliance. We get these grants partly it's because they support us in our project. And that goes back to the efforts staff put into building that relationship, in getting the permits ready. So we have pretty much a, quote, shovel-ready project that usually put us ahead of the queue to get grants. So besides doing a good job filling out the application, all the work behind it is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
One downer piece of information is we're going to have to share some of this money with our partner, Alameda County, for our shared project, but we're working with them on that. But it's a good problem to have.
They can have $1. Give me 10. We'll give them 10. Director Akbari?
No additional comments from me.
I often complain about the 20-year period. I think I need to thank all those who have delayed our project to the tune of $6 million. Terrific job by staff, but I also think it showed that, I think it proved that we were right, that working with the agencies versus, against trying to fight it, accept it, hey, it's there. We need to be proactive and do this. It's proving right. And I think we've proved it right now, and it's proving right in the form of actual dollars, and not just dollars, significant dollars. You start throwing around figures of $9 million, that's a lot of money. A 5.3. Have we ever had a grant this big? I don't think so.
I believe that's the largest one. It's even the largest one that the Wildlife Conservation Board is.
It's the largest in California that was handed out.
The largest one I remember is we received a significant grant for the expansion of DSAL. Something tells me that was, if memory serves, $2.5 million, something like that. But I don't remember anything like that.
That grant was $2.7 million.
2.7.
Yeah, almost double our other major grants. So no, staff just absolute terrific job. I don't know what to say. I looked at all of the awards that were given out by the Conservancy, and we were the top grant award, and we were by far and away well ahead of other people right here in the Bay Area that were just getting like $300,000, $500,000, and so $5.3 million really stood out across the state of California. And I hope people are asking, just in the general public, why ACWD? Why Alameda Creek? What's going on up there? Why is this so important to the health of the bay? Why is it so important to the habitat? Environmentally, what we're doing as a contribution. And here's just a little suggestion to staff. I think the present board members share this opinion. We need to, I think, help educate the public as to why we're spending ratepayer money on fish restoration and habitat restoration in Alameda Creek and, back in the Snow Canyon and Regional Park, etc. Because I think there are people who say, aren't you wasting our money? I mean, is it really worth it? And why are you working with fish anyway? I hear people in public, and they ask me, they usually are polite about it, but the bottom line question is, why are you investing all this money on fish? And we need to provide the link to the fact that this is extremely important to our water supply. Alameda Creek's 40% of our water supply. If we cannot accommodate these projects, as Director Huang and Gunther, you've mentioned in the past,
we could see ourselves in having some very serious problems where we're losing one of our major water supplies. And I don't think the public makes that connection. They say great. People who love fish restoration say great, but I don't think a lot of our public in the Tri-City area actually links water supply to what we're trying to do. And they're inextricably linked.
The upcoming
Totally
issue
agree.
of the aqueduct.
I said of the board members present.
I do have one more comment that I would like to put it in the record.
Yes.
I think we should thank the Coastal Conservancy and the California Wildlife Conservation Board for understanding the importance of our project and in supporting us in making our project a reality. Regulatory agencies tend not to be thanked a lot, so you actually would be nice.
I like that idea.
Well, for the groundbreaking ceremony, we are definitely providing opportunities for those that brought money to speak.
Is there a small portion of this grant money that's earmarked for a party?
No.
No, sorry.
Wishful thinking. Okay. So, I think we've got a vote that has to come. We've got a motion and a second. And
Okay. Directors Gunther?
Aye.
Akbari?
Aye.
Huang?
Aye.
Weed? And Sethy?
aye.
Did we actually make the motion?
don't think we did.
I don't think we made the motion. I will make the motion for this item.
Okay.
I thought we had a motion on the table.
Missed it.
5.6.
Well, better safe than sorry.
Yep.
Okay,
Revote.
We'll do the vote again. Okay, Directors Gunther?
Aye.
Akbari?
Aye.
Huang?
Aye.
Weed? And Sethy?
Aye. So the vote is 4-0 with Director Weed abstaining.
Such a good item that you voted on it twice.
Totally.
Double support.
We're all giddy when it comes to millions of free money.
Really think about taking it away.
Okay.
Peterson went to go down.
So we're up to reports.
Mhm.
And staff, I don't believe, had any reports that we wanted to cover. We, of course, under operational reports, have the rainfall report, should the board be interested in seeing that. But other than that, we have nothing for 6.1 and 6.2.
I think I was able to add 2 inches to the graph, so I know approximately where we are.
Okay.
Any comments on reports? Seeing none, okay. I just would like to make one short comment for benefit of the board public here. We're at the end of March. We were 3/4 of the way through the year. Our revenue was at just a little under 76% of our budget target. Our water production has actually been lower the first 3 months of the year, below our forecast. But we're still meeting our revenue targets, and we're down at about 59% of our budgeted costs. So we're controlling things financially, and I think we're in a much healthier position now than we were a year ago. And it's evident on our financial statements. So with that, we'll move on to 6.3. There are no staff presentations,
No
correct?
formal presentations this evening.
So we'll go to the general manager's reports.
So the first item is a brief video that we'll share, and Mr. Peterson also wants to share some information on the Cal Nevada AWWA competition results, and operations and maintenance staff participated in several events. So ACWD, Team ACWD is back, and Mr. Peterson has more information to provide on that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Shaver. So I'm very proud to announce that at the Cal Nevada AWWA Operator Symposium held last month in Burlingame, California, the district's amazing top ops team, known as the Smooth Operators, finished in first place out of a field of 16 competing teams from the Cal Nevada section of AWWA. This year's team was a collaborative effort made up of 2 operators from the district and 1 operator from the Santa Clara Valley Water District. The district's team participants were John Herrick and Louis Cuellar. John is the middle individual and Louis is on the right. And from Santa Clara Valley Water District, the operator was Chris Cooley. The first and second place teams will now advance to the National AWWA competition event, which will be held during the week of June 11th in Las Vegas. Now, beginning in 2015, the rules of the competition have changed. The Tops Ops competition is similar to a collegiate type of competition where a moderator will ask water treatment and distribution related questions. Except that instead of pressing a buzzer to answer questions, the competing teams are required to write responses to questions on a whiteboard within an allotted time, and the teams with the correct answers are awarded points. At the end of the event, the team with the highest score wins. Each team is comprised of 3 operators. But that's not all. The district's very own Utility Worker 3, David Kim, competed in both the Meter Madness and Hot Flare events. The Meter Madness event is a race to assemble a residential water meter from a box containing individual parts of a meter, plus a few extra parts just to confuse the participants. The Hot Flare competition is a race to simulate connecting a copper service line from a water main to a meter box. The contestant has to bend the service line to the correct elevation, flare the end and connect an angle stop while under pressure. David finished 5th in the Meter Madness event and 4th in the Hot Flare event, barely missing qualifying to advance to the finals in Las Vegas by only 1/10 of a second. And so Andy's going to show you the video. David Kim is the contestant on the left. Do we have sound? Okay, that's the end of my presentation.
Good work. Seems like John Herrick is on every winning team, year in, year out.
Yeah, the last team that we assembled was in 2014 when we went to the Nationals in Boston. We took 2nd place. So we haven't had a team since 2014. So we're all excited that various operators are back into the swing of things.
Yeah, good. It's amazing how our mid-sized water district always is right there at the very top in these competitions. So we'll move on to the next general GM report.
Yes, and Laura Heides will be providing some information about our planned Rubber Dam number 3 groundbreaking ceremony and what we're kind of planning for the event, and we'll collect any board suggestions if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. We're very excited on April 23rd at 10 a.m. to be hosting this groundbreaking event. We'll have folks gather at the location, and we'll have a space for folks to check in. They're speaking and all of that. And then what we are going to do is have a short program with speakers that will include Jeff Miller from the Alameda Creek Alliance, who's confirmed, and then the granting agencies for our various grants that have been so generous will have an opportunity to speak. We're coordinating with them. And we'll also potentially have some elected officials that will be attending. We're still confirming that. And then, of course, we'll have an opportunity for both the board vice president and president to make some remarks as well. So we're hoping to keep the program fairly short with just a few minutes for each speaker. And then we'll wrap up with some photo opportunities with our shovels and the breaking of the ceremonial ground. And after the photos and all that fun, we'll have a variety of different poster boards that people from various groups throughout the district will be preparing related to the district's projects and our work in Alameda Creek and such, for the attendees to mingle and view the posters, talk to staff with any questions, and then from there people can move on about their day and enjoy the event. So that's sort of the brief overview of what we have planned. There's still preparations ongoing, but we will have things hopefully firmed up a little bit before the event and can send something out to folks. So I'm happy to answer any questions or take suggestions back to the team.
And once we provide a detailed agenda and what it means to directors, you can provide feedback, and we'd be happy to take that into account.
So I just have one quick question. Would parking be a problem? Parking along the creek is always really nasty.
Good question. So we're very fortunate to have our facilities team involved with the planning, and the district does have a property there toward the end of Vallejo Street, so we're going to arrange to have some parking there, some parking on the street as well, and we'll have staff to help direct cars and the folks who are coming in them.
Okay.
More questions?
And we do encourage carpooling too, of course.
Are we going to have any food there?
We'll just have some light snacks, not a big meal or anything, but just something light.
Something bubbly?
Like nothing.
Martinelli's?
I'm not exactly sure of the drink choice at this point, but it will meet all district policies.
Is that a request?
Right. Martinelli's sounds good.
Okay.
Okay.
You heard a request.
Got it.
Board president.
And we could always have a fish fry if we want.
I don't know if cooking will be involved. Probably not, but.
Okay. I have a few more items under General Manager's report. One noted on your agenda, and then a few others. Mr. In has late-breaking news on the California water fix that he would like to share with the board.
Okay, thank you. Before I get into the news, I thought I'd give a little background to catch up as far as how we got to this point. So if you remember back to the February 8th board meeting, we provided you with a copy of a letter from the Department of Water Resources, and they announced that California Water Fix would be built in 2 stages. Essentially build one tunnel first, and then a second tunnel at some point when it could be funded. And that would meet with the needs of the public water agencies that are funding the project. Well, there have been some additional twists and turns in the project since February that you may have read about in the media, and there's late-breaking news just this afternoon. The state water contractors began discussions regarding the costs and benefits of providing additional financing to cover the unsubscribed portion of water fix costs so that the entire project, 2 tunnels, could proceed as originally planned. As a result, negotiations began with the Central Valley project contractors, that's the federal side, on options and contracting arrangements to provide security to safeguard the investments of state water contractors that chose to provide financing, becoming investors in the project. However, at the beginning of this month, the Central Valley project contractors and officials from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation decided that while they appreciated the financing proposal and they were interested in pursuing such an arrangement, there's still a number of issues that need to be resolved within the Central Valley project before they could commit to this approach. Therefore, the state water contractors decided to switch back to the stage project, the one-tunnel approach. Well, the staff of the Metropolitan Water District informed their board that they'd be bringing the DWR stage construction project, the one-tunnel approach, for action at their board meeting scheduled for today. And in response to this notification, some of their board of directors requested that an option be also placed in front of them today for the full project, and so that they consider option 1 being one tunnel or option 2 being 2 tunnels. Yesterday, Governor Brown got into the mix and he submitted a letter to their board of directors and urged the support of a full project without any delay. Well, late this afternoon, the Metropolitan Water District approved financing for its share of California Water Fix as a state water project contractor, and to also fund the unsubscribed share of the full 2-tunnel project, up to 64.6% of the total project costs. And if you work it out, the total project being $16.7 billion, that means they're committed up to $10.8 billion of the project. News reports are starting to come out even now on this. So with this action, the project has changed once again. Staff will need to come back to the board with additional information, the changes and the costs and benefits of the full project, potential project gap funding, and joint power authorities that will be formed to finance and manage the design and construction of California Water Fix. We're anticipating that with today's vote, things are going to start happening fairly quickly, so we may be back as soon as next month to present all this information to you.
I read about the the decision of the board before I came to our board meeting, but I could not find in any news articles what the exact vote was. I just knew that San Diego had registered some opposition and some of the Orange County, I think.
That's correct. I was actually watching the process, and the funny thing in the video, they flashed it up really quickly, so I didn't get the numbers till afterwards, and the vote was 61% in favor and 39% opposed.
Is that a weighted vote on their board?
I believe so.
Their board votes are weighted by assessed property values. So, for example, the city of Los Angeles would probably have the largest share vote based on the assessed property values within the city.
Mm-hmm. I seem to recall it was a weighted voting. Okay. Well, since I've always been a proponent of Governor Brown's vision for this, I'm ecstatic that everything worked out in the end for a 2-tunnel solution. I believe this is going to be a lot lower cost than building 2 separate tunnels in 2 different time periods.
So staff will come back to the board with the implications of this to ACWD.
Yeah.
The 2-tunnel approach, again with updated financial numbers, so that the board can be as informed as possible before we fully commit. And so we will do that. And when will we do that?
We may be back as early as next month's board meeting.
So stay tuned.
Mm-hmm.
Question, if I might. The conversation has been about 2 tunnels. There's also a number of issues relating to the California Aqueduct, subsidence, et cetera, which, is that not also part of the California Water Fix, or only the tunnels?
It's only the tunnels. The subsidence issue is being addressed separately, separate project.
It's a separate funding source.
Mm-hmm. So should I continue on GM reports? So we have a handout for the board that looks like this, and I just wanted to say a few words about the United States Geological Survey will be unveiling a report on the regional implications of a magnitude 7.0 earthquake on the Hayward Fault on April 18th. And because of the attention that we think that water utilities will receive once this report is released to the public, the agencies, in a show of cooperation and collaboration, arranged for a media tour to highlight the infrastructure and the mitigations that the water agencies have taken to try to best prepare for this earthquake event. Shireen Gonzalez stayed with the tour group all day. Many of the media stayed with the tour group all day, including KTVU, Channel 2, Tom Vakar, longtime reporter there, hung in there all day. I thought the coverage that we received was pretty favorable from KTSF, KGO, and the Bay Area News Group. And so that was great. But the more recent news is I attended a presentation by Ken Hudnut of the USGS yesterday in San Francisco about the Hayward event, and I want to refer you to some of the information in the slides because that offers kind of like a preview of what's going to be contained in the report. And the first slide I want to bring your attention to looks like this. I'm sorry, the pages aren't numbered. But an amazing amount of fires are expected to occur after a magnitude 7.0 event. Some areas in our service area. And one of the more interesting things that the presenter shared with the BAWAC general managers in San Francisco yesterday was they're anticipating pretty severe fires on the major refineries after the event. And that's significant for two reasons. One is obviously it's an emergency response issue, a human safety issue, air quality issue, but also, as it was presented to us yesterday, basically each fire has about enough foam to begin extinguishing a major fire, but not necessarily control it. So if you have multiple refineries with major fires, that could be a huge uncontrollable issue to deal with, and as well as an environmental disaster. The second issue I wanted to point you to is this slide. It is and I apologize, but I just received this information yesterday, which shows outage periods that different areas around the bay might see for water service after the 7.0 earthquake. And you can see that the number of days shown on the bottom axis gets pretty significant for Alameda County. This isn't very different than the results from our own seismic vulnerability analysis that the district performed with John Eidinger back in 2010. And certainly we've been actively working to improve our seismic reliability since then, and even accelerated projects once the board received that information. But I should also point out that USGS didn't work very closely with us. They asked for information, and information was provided to them, but I'm sure the nuances of our system maybe aren't considered, but they do have a model. They have made a lot of assumptions. They've performed analysis, and we certainly will review the report closely once it becomes public. The last slide I wanted to point your attention to, which I think is probably the most interesting, is this slide with the two spigots. And what it shows is extended prolonged outages for water service, where in fact they're forecasting 30% of service returned for our service area in 7 days, but full service returned in 210 days. They made assumptions on potential mitigations, including like upgrading all of your pipe as I understand the presentation yesterday. But the improvement in terms of outages is not that significant when you do that. So according to their analysis, the improvement goes from 30% of service returned in 7 days to 47% of service returned in 7 days, and full service return about the same prolonged time period. So obviously we will review the study closely, but what's interesting is that the way this is going to be rolled out is very publicly, and it will be unveiled for the public and water utilities at the same time on April 18th. Again, we'll review the report closely when it becomes available, but we think there's some information in here that may raise concerns in the community, obviously. This is pretty interesting information if you're not aware of the risk from a major earthquake. So what we're going to do is prepare preliminary messages and share them with the board and be ready for any potential media coverage on the 18th. Laura Heides will also provide the board with information about the public events that are planned for April 18th. There's one in Fremont and one in Berkeley that we're aware of so far, and we'll shoot out an email to the board with specific information, should you be interested in that.
4 of us are going to be
yeah,
down in Seaside.
right. And
Training.
And Laura Heides will be capably covering the Fremont event because I will be there as well.
Good.
So we will be there, and we'll be as ready as we can be. I think once we dig into the report, we may have additional information to share, but certainly when you have a major fault bisect your service area, it's going to cause major disruption. So we're going to take advantage of this in terms of outlining the risk, highlighting what we're doing to prepare, but also encouraging the community to prepare themselves, because there's no doubt that there will be service disruptions and maybe for extended periods of time. And then the fuel issue, which is one thing that I'm glad USGS worked into, will be something that we review closely too, because we want to take a look at the power outage assumptions and maybe adjust how we're thinking we might respond as a result.
So I do have a data request. As part of talking point preparations for us, can you also provide us with district-specific information in terms of recovery? Because right now, all these data points we're lumping with Alameda County.
Sure. We'll go ahead and review the Eidinger report and the assumptions there. We'll take into account the mitigations that we've done and hopefully provide similar information that we think is applicable for ACWD.
That would be great. I think our customers would want to know exactly what's impact to them versus to the county.
Right.
Thank you.
And that's East Bay Mud and ACWD and Hayward, and they do have a model, but I'm sure the assumptions in it are pretty gross.
Yeah, well, I will, almost like a mantra, it would be very interesting if when we develop even a brief concept of operations and how we're going to respond after a major event. We've got a draft, and I think it needs to be fleshed. I would note on the fires, one of the lessons from Loma Prieta, as people learn that they don't have earthquake insurance, but they still have fire insurance. There were a number of fires for a period of days, even weeks, that occurred in the impact area. And they were suspect in the sense that the people now had could get full recovery for rebuilding of their properties from a fire standpoint when they had no coverage for damage as a result of an earthquake. Major change in the risk factors and then your operations. The concept of sanitary flows is, in none of the literature I've seen, where you don't have water flow and you need to have plastic bags. I haven't seen any public response developed by the districts or North Union Sanitary District and how to respond to and how to inform the public what to do and where to go after an earthquake. It's I believe, one of the major voids in our strategic plan. Thank you.
So this is just an unagendaed informational item. Thank you for that feedback. May I proceed? I've got just two other really quick items. So just for the board's benefit, at the May 17th board meeting, our next regular board meeting, I'll be requesting a performance evaluation. And then lastly, I have sad news that I know that some of you are aware of. Former director and manager of operations, Phil Udick, passed away on April 1st. And we'll provide more information as we receive it. So with that, that's all I had for general manager's reports. For director comments, we have no items listed on meetings attended, but I know that several directors attended the March 9th Renew It meeting at Stanford University, and if you have any, based on the board rules, if you have any expense reimbursement for that, you're required to report out at the next regular board meeting. I apologize for not listing it and catching you by surprise. It was something that I just noticed right before the board meeting. So just wanted to let you know that before you get into the next item on the agenda.
Why don't we start with you, Director Weed?
Well, I have no expense reports. I did attend a Water Now Alliance meeting out of state in Utah, but that was covered by the Water Now Alliance through grants they have from the Walton Foundation and others. And some excellent people, some of the same people that were at the Renew It conference at Stanford, and had a chance to carry on even more in-depth conversations. So, thank you.
Director Huang?
I didn't attend the conference.
No, but any reports?
No.
Director Akbari?
From my end, I did attend the Renew It conference on March 9th. I thought it was a good event overall. It gave kind of a very high level description on how different agencies in the Bay Area could work together in creating potable reuse opportunities within the area. I think for me, I would really like to go check out the Santa Clara Valley Water District's potable reuse facilities and kind of see what they're doing, how they're doing it, and so if we can organize a kind of field trip from ACWD to check out their facilities, I would really appreciate that.
We can do that. Pleasure.
They have general public tours about once a quarter. Usually I've seen it posted on the Santa Clara Valley Water District website. I know John and I have been there multiple times. It's quite a interesting facility to see. Yeah.
They have one of the few purple fire hydrants in California.
Director Gunther?
I have to report out on the California Water Policy Conference. I was insulted. I don't know. I was going to draft a letter to the board we're a sponsor, and it was a love fest for SB 623. The activists in favor were totally out of control. Almost every session was a plug for how we should support AB 623 or SB 623, and if you didn't, you were part of the evil groups. There was one session that was insulting. I mean, literally insulting. I've never experienced that before. I almost walked out of that session, but I decided to stay. The guy sitting at my table did walk out, the other member. At another session, another water, I think, director, maybe, I don't remember what district he was from, he walked out. We talked about the lead and copper rule earlier, and there was a session on lead and copper, and Bruce Mackler was there as one of the panelists, as was Kua, and they did an excellent job basically trying to educate the rest of the committee on what the whole subject matter was. And I think one of the best things that came out of that, I was vocal, I'll admit it. One of the best things that came out is that communication of the lead and copper rule is vital. And in fact, I think it was Bruce Mackler who commented to the sociologist. There was a sociology professor from one of the Sacramento schools there, and he had a hit of 500 parts per million on his campus. And Bruce just kind of looked at him and said, "How did you take that sample?" And the guy just didn't really have a good answer. And so at one point that guy said, "We're going to have all these mini Flint, Michigans all over the place." And Bruce, we had already discussed communication at this point. As I actually identified, I said, "Look, you know, we get one hit on this rule and suddenly our water is contaminated with lead from this report we have to produce." And Bruce agreed that that's, you know, an issue, and we have to be able to communicate that. But then when this guy said, "We've got all these mini Flint, Michigans all over," he said, "Well, there's the problem." He said, "Flint, Michigan had nothing to do with this. It was a violation of the law. And people like you making these statements are the problem." Something very similar. It wasn't quite that way, but that's basically what he said, told the guys, "You're the problem." By, you know, and it was all over the place. I mean, almost every session was a disappointment. About the only thing I could say was it was worthy to go there and find out what the activists far, again, I'm going to have to use the term far left because that's what basically it was, where they're coming from, and to understand there is no, there's no working with them. They're set. They know what's right. We're wrong. And effectively, yeah, that one session, they insulted every person in this room. I really wanted to consider removing our funding because it was our state treasurer, was it Betty E? I think she's a comptroller, who said that she's using the PERS money as a method, as a tool to send messages to companies. And I almost wanted to send a letter back to the committee, and I still may do this, I've been a little busy at work, but send a letter to the committee and say that I listened in that speech about sending a message with your money. And the message I wanted to send from this board, I haven't written it yet, but I still plan on probably trying to set it up, is You need to be more balanced if you're going to present a subject.
Definitely.
If you want to just say this conference is about how wonderful SB 623 is and how anybody who disagrees with it is evil, then fine. I wanted to let them know, I'd like to let that committee know that I listened to what she had to say. And they need to remember that they're funded by agencies like us. And while they could have all this activists and all these college professors and all these students up there saying everything they want about how bad we are, they need to remember who's paying for it. It was quite disgusting, actually. I was very, very disappointed. I made my views known up there. I think some people heard later. But I've never given, I don't think I've ever given a 0 on an eval. But I did it there. I did there. The one session was just so horrid. I got through it. But I only got through it to realize how horrid it was. I just couldn't believe. And the one quote from the girl, I wish I had the exact quote, was brown water for brown people. She was explaining she had this bottle of brown water up there and how some public official had made that comment. Well, I've since done some research on that, and I've yet to find anywhere where that quote actually was stated, except for by Steve Harvey, the comedian, regarding Flint, Michigan and Cleveland on a talk show about basketball. It kind of, I see it almost as, but that group, that mentality, does that. They make their own quotes up. And one only has to look up hands up, don't shoot. It was never said. It became a rallying cry because somebody heard that somebody else said they heard. It was never said, yet that became a national rallying cry. So this is what's going on over there with SB 223 and that side. They're creating stuff, and the sad thing is there are answers available. And if they'd only work with the water agencies and Aqua, we wouldn't need this. But they're not. That's what I walked away from. Will we participate again? Should we participate again? I don't know. I'd like to give them another opportunity. It really, I mean, there was a great opportunity there. But they really need to understand that they got to present both sides. And they did on a couple of the subjects. But very disappointing. I've had my rant.
President Sethy, I should note on one of the same days as the PPIC, I did attend the Water Education for Latino Leaders, the WELL conference in Sacramento. And ironically, they were far less dramatic and in their protest on water issues, although environmental justice is a theme of that group as well.
Okay, I've got a few things to report on. So, I was up at Calaveras Reservoir Dam, last week, and the gentleman who appeared tonight to make some public comments, he was part of that group. So I just wanted to quickly report the dam was at elevation 694. The foundation is at 540, and when I was there last fall, I think I was with Director Weed, they were telling us that they expected the dam to be completed by December of this year. They've now moved that up to August. And I separately talked to a project foreman there off to the side, and he said the inside date that they're aiming for is July 4th. So this is moving forward a lot more rapidly than we thought. It took, what, like 6 years to get down to the foundation. And I think the most dramatic, I know we've been there many times now, but I think the most dramatic sight of the reservoir was early last year, when they had vacuum cleaners down on the bottom of this massive dam, literally vacuuming the foundation to put in a new dam. And here they are, they were describing, I've heard this many times, it's like painting a house. You strip everything down, it takes a long time to do all the prep work, and then they get in, and the rest of the work is coming along really nicely. And we had several different community groups there. The Citizens Advisory Committee for Sunol, the group that this gentleman represented, Mission Peak Conservancy. There were other people from around Alameda County. So, but I agree with what this gentleman said. I was surprised that they put out invitations to all the elected people in Alameda County. I was the only one who showed up. And yet, I mean, everybody was invited. So, let me move on here. I was 3 days up in Sacramento. The first day I was at the California Water Commission, and the brief report is what I thought was the most interesting item on the agenda was, now that we're going to see funding on the WISIP projects by June, it's suddenly dawning on the commissioners how long it's going to take to get through the permitting process and all the protests. And one commissioner said out loud in the audience, to the audience, this could take 10 to 15 years to get a project completed right now because of all the CEQA process, permitting, all the protests that will be filed, and then finally trying to get a project built. So it's just dawning on them now, and everybody's kind of petrified because, this is my opinion, they're petrified because they're already under the gun. It's been 4 years since we passed the water bond, and they still haven't doled out the money. Once they make the funding decisions, it may be a long time to come before they actually get something done. Second thing I found interesting, I'll pass along the charts. I forgot to bring them here. Or they're available, Stephen, they're available on the California Water Commission website in the presentation package. There are a couple of really interesting slides in there about the history of Article 27 water, year by year, and how it's changed going back decades. And since we're reliant on, or we park Article 27 water, like at San Luis Reservoir, it was really interesting to see the change over time, and especially how little we've gotten over the last 10 years. It was only like 2 years we really received anything. And that it's something like 80% of all that water goes to Southern California. It's taken by Metropolitan. So we're a fraction of 1% of
We're speaking here Article 21 water?
21, Article 21.
Heavy flow? Okay.
Yeah, sorry. So I was up there Wednesday. They had to shift the meeting over because of a conflict. So we met at the State Supreme Court building in the library meeting room up on the 5th floor. And if you've never been in this building across from the state capitol, it's like a really interesting museum to go into, and it's free. I was talking to Bob Wykowski afterward and told him that after the meeting was over, I walked every floor, explored everything in that building, and he said he did the same thing first time he went in there. So if you ever get a chance, I recommend it. Thursday I was on the Delta tour, and to piggyback on your Haywired presentation, I'm trying to get a hold of a presentation that was given to us at lunchtime, which I think is worth seeing here. It's an animated video of what would happen after a major earthquake on the Hayward Fault, what happens to the Delta, and it shows how, in time-lapse photography, how seawater goes in within 4 to 6 hours. It's 3 to 4 miles in, and by the end of 8 days, it's down to the pumping stations, down by Clifton Court. So at that point, Kurt Schmoody, who's one of the top people in the state on the Delta, now retired, was trying to inform us, for people that are not believers in what the Delta tunnels mean for reliability, that if we have that major quake, and we could have water distribution problems in our communities, right? But if we can't even bring water in from the Delta because we can't process it in our production treatment plants, we're in real trouble. And so I'll see if I can get a hold of that video. I agree with Director Weed. I was there on Thursday at Well. He was there on Friday. And then I shared Friday with Director Gunther at UC Davis. I found the Well Conference to be much more balanced, whereas the people at the California Water Policy Conference, the environmental groups, were just, there's no compromise with these folks. I mean, I was getting into some serious debates with people. And one lady attorney from the Environmental Defense Fund, I couldn't believe some of the stuff she was saying. But, well, they are advocates for relief in their communities, but I think in general people understand that this is a statewide problem that we're dealing with. So we went on a day tour of the Delta, and having been on other Delta tours, this one just took a different route, and it's amazing how many miles of levees there are. It's something like 1,100 miles of levees in the Delta. Can you believe that? Hundreds of islands, a couple, like 80 that are really important. We don't think about this. We can look at it in the conference room. You can see what it looks like. But the threat to the levees, is really interesting to go through, and they spent a lot of time showing us different scientific work that's done by Army Corps of Engineers, others, but you really don't think about the number of miles of levee when you fly over. It's like driving halfway across the country or something. At the California Water Policy Conference, we had an interesting presentation called Water and Weed, Now That It's Legal. I decided not to attend that one.
Let's hope it's electable.
But I did attend the Bay Delta Restoration, Laying a Path Forward to Success, and that was a very interesting session. Steve Ritchie was on the panel representing San Francisco, and it was a good, lively discussion between all the water interests in the Bay and the Delta, from environmental to urban water agencies. So learned a lot there, and between the Delta tour the day before and listening to this more scientific presentation, it was really good. I want to mention I was sitting next to a gentleman that I think we're all familiar with, except Aziz, I don't think you are. We have a colleague in the industry by the name of Carl Morrison. And 2 weeks ago I was sitting next to him, and this past weekend he died in a plane crash up in Sonoma. So I was very saddened by that because we see him at so many different conferences, Aqua and other things, and he was a private pilot for many years. He had just completed work on Friday working for the Sonoma County Water Agency, and flew back home when the storm was hitting the Bay Area. So we'll miss Carl a lot, and an incredibly smart guy who knew the whole water industry. He was one of the most well-recognized attorneys, and I believe he had 2 other master's degrees. And we'll miss Phil Udick too, our former director. A lot of people are not aware of this, maybe that some people that worked with him, but he was on the board for a long time, and then he served the district for many years afterward, I think 20 years, sitting on our financing authority. I came to a number of those meetings over the years, and would see him and Director Borghi, Redeker.
Were the 3.
Right. Redeker, Borghi, and Udick, and we've lost all 3 just in a few short years here. So it's kind of disheartening when you lose people that you knew for a good portion of your lifetime. And that's it for my reports.
Okay.
Get up to Calaveras while you can see it, otherwise all you're going to see is a completed dam.
Well, I know that I believe 2 directors are able to take advantage of the tour that Bosca is arranging up there. Director Akbari, Director, I think it's you, Director Sethy.
Yeah, I'm planning on going back. I can never resist a chance to go up there.
And I think Mr. Peterson is going as well. Correct. So, we do have a closed session for you this evening. I can just go ahead and read it. Item 8.1, pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators. The agency designated negotiators are Robert Shaver, Jennifer Rogers, and Glenn Berkheimer. The employee organizations are Operating Engineers Local 3 and the ACWD Operators Association. So I guess we're adjourning to closed session at about 8:22. Okay. And that's up to you, Mr. President.
So we'll adjourn to closed session and then report back.
Right. Sure.
Duty to report back on the closed session.
Sure.
We're reconvening the meeting at 9:55.
Okay, so at 9:55, the board returned from closed session, and in closed session, pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators. Agency designated negotiators are Robert Shaver, Jennifer Rogers, and Glenn Berkheimer. The employee organizations are Operating Engineers Local 3 and the ACWD Operators Association. And during the closed session, the board provided direction to the designated agency negotiators. And that concludes the closed session report.
Great, thank you. Any other comments here tonight?
So.
Okay. Close the meeting.